What is up? Welcome into a YouTube exclusive of Roughing the Kicker, a daily Kansas City Chiefs podcast on arrowheadreport.com. Today I'm joined with Jordan Foote. We're going to be talking about the 2021 Chiefs free agents, and let me tell you, there's a lot of them. Jordan, before we get started, how you doing today, man?
Tucker, I'm good. I'm a little anxious thinking about how many free agents the Chiefs are going to have to re-sign or let go, but I guess in Veach we trust. There's really no better guy for the job than Brett Veach.
Yeah, you're right. If there's one guy that we can have confidence in knowing which ones to bring back and pulling which strings correctly, it's going to be Brett Veach. So let's
Mhm.
look at, these free agents. We've got 28 different types, not 28 different types. We have 28 different free agents of all different types. I believe there's only like what, three different types: restricted, unrestricted, and there's another one I can't remember off the top of my head. That's for Connor. We should have Connor come on and talk about those types of contracts, but that's all above us. But there's 28 different free agents. When you saw that, Jordan, what were your reactions?
I mean, especially for a team that brought back so many people who played in the Super Bowl a year ago. I mean, I guess it's something that depth really sets the great teams apart from the elite ones or the good from great or whatever. So the Chiefs are known to kind of scour the free agent market for guys like that, but 28 is over half of your 53-man roster that you're worried about. Even though some of those guys aren't on the 53-man in or practice squad or whatever, it's still a pretty substantial amount.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think one of the biggest position groups that stuck out to me, I think you as well, was wide receiver. They lose
Mhm.
Sammy Watkins, Byron Pringle, Demarcus Robinson. Now we do know that D-Rob and Sammy both, came back this year. D-Rob took a 1-year deal. Sammy Watkins took a pay cut. But what do you think the future is at the wide receiver position? And do you see them re-signing any of those three guys?
I think that Robinson could come back. There was a quote from Patrick Mahomes before the season where he said that Robinson could be a number one in some places. Now, I don't think he's quite that good. I think he could be a number two receiver in a few places where you're kind of lacking there. I mean, Sammy Watkins, it's not that he's a great player, but the offense just seems to run smoother and does run smoother when he's there. Now, is that worth a $9 million figure plus the incentives or whatever? I don't think so personally, but the problem is we've talked about it time and time again on the pod. McCall Hardman can't replace him. I mean, if the
Yeah.
Chiefs lose Sammy Watkins, they would have to thrust Robinson into that role, assuming he comes back, or they would have to draft a wide receiver or go sign one via free agency. So if the Chiefs don't bring one or both of those guys back, there has to be a replacement, either draft or free agency wise.
That's interesting you mentioned his market value because I was looking on Spot Track. That's where we're seeing all these numbers and figures
Mhm.
out of Spot Track. It says that his market value is $9.7 million. And he did take a pay cut, like I mentioned before, to play this season, kind of give the Chiefs a little bit more cap room. We also don't really know what the cap figure is going to be either. That's going to be a big thing. There's several teams I believe that are already over the cap just in the NFL in general, and they're going to have a hard time. I think we might see a mass cutting of a lot of players, mass
Mhm.
shedding of lots of contracts. Jimmy Garoppolo could be one of those guys that could go just around the league. We talk about Matt Ryan leaving when you talk about quarterbacks, just because the league's cap is so uncertain, and I think that that could lead to some interesting problems and some interesting solutions as well. Another interesting thing that I saw of the offensive guys, there's a lot of offensive linemen up for on the chopping block, I guess you could say, for free agents. You have Mike Remmers, Andrew Wiley, Daniel Kilgore, Austin Ryder, Kalichi Osimile. A lot of
Mhm.
guys that were brought in this year for on 1-year deals, but a lot of guys that have also played well. So, what do you think the Chiefs' long-term plan is at offensive line, and do you think it really includes any of these guys?
Luckily for the Chiefs, Lucas Niang will eventually fit into whatever that long-term plan is, which is good.
Right.
Um, I would like Osemele to come back because he's a guy who really was playing extremely well before his
Mhm.
injury, and I think they're going to say, I don't know if I want to take a chance on this guy. The Chiefs are going to say he played well. The team loved him. They rallied around him when I mean, I'm big into reading the body language of the players, and when Osemele went down, you could tell the team knew, like, that's one of our guys who we really care about who went
Yeah.
down. The team loves him. I think Andy Reid likes having him around. He still has plenty left in the tank. I think he showed that this year. So he would be priority number one, I think, in terms of bringing back next year. And then he's not a free agent, but Eric Fisher is a guy who might be
Hmm.
saving his bacon. He could have been a cap casualty a year from now. But number one, Niang didn't get reps to prep to take that spot. And B, Fisher's been pretty good this year. So he's also a guy to keep an eye on, even though he's not officially a free agent.
That's interesting you mentioned that because both tackles actually have decent sized contracts. That
Mhm,
was a talk coming into this year's. Will they cut Mitchell Schwartz? Will they cut Eric Fisher? Eric Fisher's been playing well. Mitchell Schwartz has been hurt. I wouldn't be shocked if we see the Chiefs move on from Mitchell Schwartz. Um, Everyone loves Mitchell Schwartz. The dude should be, what is it, a Pro Bowl? Is that what he doesn't have? He just keeps being called All Pro, but doesn't have a Pro Bowl or something. But he's a very good football player. And I think that it's disappointing to see, but he will probably be a cap casualty, as you speculated. Connor Christopherson wrote a good article about the future of the Chiefs' offensive tackle position. And he doesn't
mhm,
think, really, if you look 5 years in the future, that either one of these tackles will be here, which I think is fair. Another position that I think is going to get hit big time is the tight end position. Now, we could spend this whole video talking about the offense because they have so many like massive losses coming on the
mhm.
offense, but 3 or 4 tight ends are going to be gone, and the Chiefs will be back where they were this offseason trying to find a backup tight end.
Yeah, and I guess this year it's kind of shown that maybe that position isn't quite as important as we think. When the Chiefs signed Ricky Seals Jones, I saw an athletic guy that can hang on to the ball and said, "Well, there's tight end number two. He has like one target all season. He just hasn't been a part of the plans. Dion Yelder
Yeah.
hasn't been a part of the plans. Nick Kaiser has unfortunately been a part of a couple plans, and just his limited snaps have not been very good. So I think that's a position where the Chiefs should be okay with snagging someone off a practice squad or using their last draft pick on a tight end or something. So last year I was a little bit worried about it, but heading into this offseason coming up, I'm not too worried.
Anthony Sherman is another guy I saw that was up.
Mhm,
I mean, how many teams carry a fullback on their roster? Isn't very many, and the Chiefs don't really use
mhm.
him all that much. I don't know if he will be resigned. He seems to keep getting resigned. He's a good locker room guy. Glue guy is what Richard Sherman, Anthony Sherman is for the team. And let's move on to the defensive side of the ball because even though there are a lot of free agents up on the offensive side, there are a ton on the defensive side as well, especially some big ones at cornerback. You have Brashad Breeland, you have Charvarius Ward both up. I think on our podcast, what was that on Thursday, Jordan? That Connor was talking about how he was a
Yeah.
restricted free agent, and so the
Mhm.
Chiefs. I'm not. I'll be honest here. I'm not a huge into contracts. I don't know a whole lot about contracts. Connor's the guy to talk to when it comes to
Yeah.
contracts. I think he's saying that when a restricted free agent, you can designate for a pick or something like that.
Yeah, you can place a tender on him, and then if a team you don't wanna match the offer sheet or whatever they offer, then you would get a pick back in return. So the Chiefs could do that and place like a first round tender on Charvarius Ward, which would be pretty ridiculous. I don't think it's worth that, but there are ways to kind of recoup at least something when you're losing a promising young player like that.
Yeah, so there you go. Travis Ward is a restricted free agent. I think they only have 2 other restricted free agents, if I remember off the top of my head, right? I don't have the list out in front of me. But also Damian Wilson is another one. Was there anyone that stuck out to you on the defensive side of the ball that will kind of be a big hit if the Chiefs don't bring back next year?
Wilson was one where I was thinking maybe there's a little bit of a loss there. But I think the Chiefs will be okay because he's really not that great of a player. He's just a guy that you're going to lose, but then it's
Yeah.
always tough to replace those guys. Tano Passanio was a guy I really expected this season to take a leap. So because he hasn't, I'm okay with losing him, but the Chiefs are going to lose a lot of depth on that defensive line. And luckily they've found guys like Turk Wharton and Mike Dana who will kind of make up for those losses. But overall, you're losing players at every level on defense. You have defensive ends.
Yeah.
You've got guys like Ben Neiman, which I don't think many people listening to the pod would be upset if the Chiefs said, Ben will look, our experiment's over with that. But they can kind of skate by with minimal investment in that position at cornerback. But still, Bashad Breeland's guy who's either 29 now or will be 30, or might already be. He's like right in the middle of
Hmm.
his prime and maybe getting ready to go to the tail end of it. And he's playing good football. So I don't know how that's going to work. It's really going to come down to prioritizing needs versus wants versus depth versus, I mean, there's so many things that go into it that it's going to be really tough to figure everything out, especially with some big contracts kicking in like a Chris Jones and a Travis
Hmm.
Kelsey and stuff like that, and a Patrick Mahomes. Luckily, they kind of gave themselves a few years before the big hit comes in for that one.
Yeah, you mentioned Rashad Breeland. He was up for a contract extension last offseason, and he did
Hmm.
sign a 1 year deal. A lot of people, I think the speculation was, is the league has been talking about the 4 game suspension they were going to give to Breeland. I don't think he was punished for his arrest. It was already a prior 4 game suspension that was in the news that he was going to get. So it kind of drove the market for Rashad Breeland down,
Hmm.
and the Chiefs were able to sign him to a 1 year deal. I don't know how that'll work this year, how the market's going to be. Again, a lot of things are up in the air because of, we don't really know the cap and anything. And I think you make a good point when you talk about the defensive ends. I was talking with Josh on Friday's episode. He was talking about, hey, we coming into the off season, coming into the season, really, we say, okay, defensive ends, they've got a lot of depth. The D
Hmm.
line's got a lot of depth. Corner, kind of thin. Safety, kind of thin. Okay. So, they add Tedrick Thompson, they get L'Jarius Sneed in the draft, they kind of bolster up
Hmm.
that end. But now you're looking at this and you're saying, okay, D end's gonna be kind of thin. Corner, we got some guys now. We got some guys that can play at corner. But I just think that's interesting. I think I phrased it as, it's not ha ha funny. It's like ironic funny that that's kind of the way it's been. But yeah, I think the defensive side of the ball might be a big off-season task, I guess you could say, for Brett Veach, trying to shore up that defense, and especially with Damian Wilson. I think Damian Wilson is kind of a big one. We were talking before the podcast started. Yeah, Damian Wilson isn't, a superstar. He's not probably going to win all pro. He's not going to go
Hmm.
to a Pro Bowl, but he's playing at a level right now where he's making his money. He's playing at a sufficient level to be an NFL
Hmm.
linebacker.
Yeah, and the thing is, even if you're not losing good players, you're losing guys who know the system. Then you
Yeah.
have to not only go out and sign guys, or you have to draft them, you have to teach them the system. You have to hope that there's not a locker room issue. You have to hope they pick everything up. You have to ease them in. I mean, it's not as simple as, oh, this guy was good with this team. Let's pluck him off the free agent wire or whatever, give him a contract, hope he comes in and plays well. It doesn't always work that way. I mean, it takes even a couple years for some guys to get adjusted. That's why those 1 year contracts, they're okay for the Chiefs because they usually don't lead to guys playing a ton of football. They have their long-term guys set up. But then again, that linebacker core is just not where I'd like it to be. I mean, Willie Gay
Right.
will hopefully step in and be a full-time guy next year at some point. Probably sooner rather than later, I hope. But
Hmm.
either way, it's going to be interesting to see how Brett Veach kind of attacks it on both ends of the football.
Jordan, I appreciate you joining me for this YouTube exclusive Roughing the Kicker, kind of a mini little video podcast, I guess you could call it. Any final thoughts for the people out there?
Nope, just keep on trucking. We're almost done with the bye week, and then it's back to normal and back to Raider week. So let's go do it.
Yes, sir. So go follow Jordan on Twitter at the best foot with an E FWD. Follow myself on Twitter at Tucker D Franklin. Give this video a like, drop a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, get this growing. We love the YouTube community. Get the YouTube community growing. We love it. And if you want more from Jordan and I and everyone else at arrowheadreport.com, go subscribe to the podcast. Go to smarturl.it /roughing. You can find the podcast on your favorite podcast provider. Then you go hit subscribe there. Go follow the podcast so you don't miss an episode. We drop episodes every single day. We drop videos every single day. So you love to see it. And if you love the Chiefs, you're going to want to be tuned in right here to Roughing the Kicker.